Good day, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Expanding the Conversation with Richard and Kofi. We're also happy to be having a conversation and having you guys join in with us. Again, we want to thank you guys all for liking our page and checking out our season one. Season one is going to be coming to a close, and then we expect to jump on maybe some new topics for conversation as we go into season two, or bring back some of the ones that we thought that were really beneficial. Today, we want to talk a little bit about, I don't want to really call them excuses, but yeah, some of the excuses or reasons that people give for not going after their dreams, or we've given for not going after our dreams at time. And I think both Richard and I were very inspired by sort of the story of the Black Panther, Chadwick, and who a lot of people didn't even know was struggling with cancer, as we went to the movies day in day out and sort of watched him be the Black Panther. And so you hear of this man who's going through all this struggle, and then you hear that he passes away, and then you realize, wow, at least from where we were standing, it didn't seem like he was making a whole lot of excuses. And at least from what everyone's been saying, right, here's a man going through a really tough time, struggling, but he doesn't allow his circumstances to really prevent him from achieving the things that he set out to do. So I just wanted to kick it in. I let Richard say hi, and then we'll jump into a number of things that we think we ought to be avoiding when we are going after our dreams.
Hey, welcome guys to another expanding the conversation episode. A lot of times, I think when you and I talk, Kofi, it's along the lines of we leverage our experiences and we also, I think, challenge each other a lot, right? In
Right.
terms of what we perceive as being possible and the timeline in which it's achievable. And and over time, I think we get to a point where we learn from each other's experiences. And one of the things that I've always been really excited about this opportunity to have these conversations with you and then share it with others is how do we live in a world where we're learning from people around us. We're seeing different people doing different, cool things and achieving extraordinary things in their life. And I think we probably both agree. A lot of times when you see them, they just look like ordinary people. And I think uh, part of having this conversation at this point is really, what you see as someone having the resources that they might have. And so if you use your example of Chadwick Boseman, everybody sees him and he's a superstar, and they're like, oh, this guy must be blessed, right? He must have the perfect opportunity. Maybe he got the perfect deal set up for him,
Yeah.
and so we think that that's what it takes to succeed, right? Even though for a lot of us, we don't necessarily want world fame like that, but maybe it might be something small. And so I think this is a great conversation to have to really sort of share and challenge, right?
Yeah.
What do we tell ourselves about ourselves that limits what we achieve and even aspire to achieve? Because I know I struggle with that myself for a long time, even though what might be people might perceive outwardly as somebody that's sort of moving in the right direction, the voices are going on in our head. And I think a lot of this, what we're talking about today, is really some of those voices that are in your head, but not really
Yeah.
100% true, right? And so we ought to
Yeah.
like challenge those because at the end of the day, I strongly believe that everything that we do and we achieve is a product of the conversation we're having with ourselves in our minds, right? So I'll let you take it from there and kind of
All
walk us
right.
through some of the
Number
common ones.
one, people say things people say that stop them from going after their dreams is I'm too old. And a lot of people say this, and I think a lot of people struggle with this. They feel like you get too old. And I actually think, speaking from a Guyanese reference, actually, Richard, I think one of the things we talked a little bit about education in some previous episodes. I think the way our educational system is sort of set up, it's sort of set up to tell you that you only can succeed when you're young. And so what happens is, you get to kindergarten and you get to your what we call it, common entrance exam. And if you didn't do that well, oh, well, too bad, right? And then you go to CXE, and then if you didn't do too well, well, that's it. It's over. You didn't make it to university, so too bad. Now you got to go take continuing classes, right? And that starts to look like something like old people have to do. And so all of a sudden, it seems like if you get to a certain age, that your chances of success tend to go away. And I think from that reference point, from a Guyanese reference point, I think we just have to beat that back. We're just never too. It's never too. You're never too old to succeed. I like to give the example of, hey, if you're 30 years old, right, and you haven't even written CXE, it really takes 5 years to do a CXE program. So you could start at 30 years old and finish by the time you're 35, and it takes like 4 years to get a university degree. If we're talking about education here and success in terms of academic success. And then you go to 35 to 39. By the time you're 40, you've got a first degree, you've got all your CXE, and they say life begins at 40. And it isn't to say that you should stop there, right? I like to use my parents as an example as well. My father and mother continue to study, and they're in their 60s and 70s, and they continue to do things. And I know of people who have picked up things later on in life, and have totally succeeded at it. And I think you're a great example of someone who's become sort of a marathon runner, and both of us who've become more involved in exercise even as we've gotten older, right? Rather than giving up on it as we got older. So I think we should really put this thing aside. We're not too old for any of this stuff. Don't let society tell us that we're too old. I know a lot of people who went and completed their high school education, college education, who decide to go after a new career and just repurpose and just reoriented their lives. We're never too old for this stuff. Rich?
Yeah, that's a common one. We're too old. There's a quote I think I heard many times that says we we overestimate what we can do in the short term and we underestimate what we can do in the long term. And so what that means is that I think a lot of times we think that we don't have enough time, right? Because some or the other one we've attached where we're heading in life to a time factor, right? And we know
Yes.
that um, I like to use the example of like Tupac Shakur, and I think he died at like 27. But legendary, right? Lives on forever. And then there are people that might have lived into their hundreds that we've never heard of. So age isn't really a factor, I think, right? That's one. There's no destination age-wise. Um, but that statement of underestimating what we can do over a long period of time and overestimating what we can do in a short period of time is really relevant to this point, because what happens is that we think that okay, we don't have enough time, but once you, as you're right, that once you start chipping away, you realize that you've got time, and there's actually more time than you realize. And
Yep.
even if you, I'll be honest, I mean, I think a lot of sort of my own personal experiences when I got to, late 30s, at that 40 point is when I realized that, oh crap, like I'm actually benefiting now from something I might have started like, 5 years ago or even
Yeah.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's never too late, because I think we really do, we really have the ability to do things at any age, and make an
I agree.
impact, feel a sense of significance, make a contribution, inspire somebody else, right? There are lots of,
Yeah.
one of the things I recognize too, Kofi, is that if you want to do something, there are lots of examples out there of people that have done things at a
Done it.
certain age.
Yeah.
So I
I mean,
think the beauty about
I
Google
think you
is that
agree.
if you want to ask, if you're 15, you say, how many people achieved extraordinary things post 50 and you hit enter, you will probably come up with 10,000 results, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we do have those examples, and we live in a world now where that information is available to us. So we can actually leverage that inspiration, right? And I
Yeah.
love stories like that, because it's almost like, it's possible, right? People that you see in dire circumstances at
Right.
any age will just, rise up and do stuff. We have a friend where, his aunt just wrote a book, right? But at a later stage in life, doing extraordinary things with limited resource. So I definitely think that age is one of those things we ought to throw out, because, like you said, I mean, I ran one marathon, so technically I'm not running marathons,
No, you're
but
a marathon runner, you know. That's
I
all good.
plan to
You get
run.
1 million and you're a millionaire. You don't need to.
Yeah, but I plan to run way into 80, 90, 100, right?
Right.
And that's
Right.
sort of like, you're right. I might have run my first marathon at 40, but now I've got 40 or 50 years of running marathons, right? And so if I take in the example of at, at 40, like I'd never run a marathon, so I'm not a marathon runner, then I would lose out on that opportunity to actually
Right.
challenge myself. So
No, but you
definitely,
proved the point, right? You proved the point that you, if it wasn't too late to run the
that's right.
marathon, right? And I think that's kind of the concept that people have. Like, I've gotten too old. No, there's a saying here. It's actually from the same book that you just referenced that our friend Boyce, his aunt, wrote, and it's said that someone said that people die at 25 and they're buried at 75. Right, but they're just buried at 75, meaning they stop living
Hmm.
after very early age. And I think we want to really encourage people to live your life. You're not too old to try new things and do new things and be productive and try a new career and go after a different kind of education and things like that. So that's number one. We're not too old, and we should try to fight that excuse or that reason. Number two, Richard, bam, I feel like a drum roll is needed, but people say I'm not talented enough. And I'll start with this one because I think a lot of people, at least in my personal life, always looked at me and said, "Hey, you've been talented, and gifted." And certainly there are multiple things that I've tried. I've tried art. I've tried music. I grew up playing drums. I've been fortunate to be good at academics and all these things. But I've every time I've moved from one level to another, I've always run into people who are like real musicians. I just play around, right? Real academics. And not to say I'm not one, but I've met a lot of people who are super smart, smarter than me. But one of the things I also realized that there was a lot of talented people who also didn't succeed. And so it taught me something. It taught me that talent isn't sort of the main ingredient for success. That there's a lot of other things, and people are talented at a lot of things, and sometimes they just don't appreciate it. But even if you were talented, it's not going to guarantee that you would be successful. I think it takes a lot more than talent. And one of the things that I would add in there, it takes the ability to stick with things, this sense of endurance. I know a lot of people when I was studying college, they didn't get things the first time or the second time, but they stuck with it until they got it and they graduated and they got out, right? And people may look at them and say, "Hey, they're not talented because they didn't get it the first time." But you know what? They graduated, and there are people who got things the first time that didn't show up to class because they couldn't handle other things that was going on in their lives, or maybe they fell in love or something. They got distracted. They just couldn't stick around. They just couldn't hold on. They couldn't finish something they started. And I've always felt that there is a virtue in finishing something that you start. And it takes a lot more than talent to take you all the way through. I think it takes real endurance. And I think that's what's really needed to succeed. Just picking something up and sticking with it. And we had conversations earlier about just not living your life by the way you feel, but by setting yourself goals and a belief system, and then just going after it regardless of how you feel. By doing that, you're going to change actually how you feel. So your actions are going to inspire your feelings. Don't let your feelings inspire your actions. And so Talent is only a really, really small part of the equation, I believe, for succeeding and achieving our dreams. It takes real endurance to get there. So, talent, I don't have enough talent. I don't think that's a good enough reason. Go out there and achieve your dream.
I I agree. Talent is, I think, oftentimes what we perceive talent as is this sort of innate thing that we have that takes us to sort of the next thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you again look at people that are world renowned, there's a book that I read called Mastery, and
Mm-hmm.
you hear the stories of the people that actually we see as some of the greats of our times, and you hear sort of the one, sometimes a lot of them weren't always the smartest in school, so they were slow starters, but they just like accumulated bits and pieces of information over and over and over
Yeah.
and over, right? And so, which added up to something big. So I think talent is almost like an accumulation of what what you're talking about there, right? Grit and knowledge acquisition. You
Exactly.
do
Great. Yep.
something over and over, and it's not always sort of an innate thing. And there are a lot of people that have a lot of skills or a lot of ability that are underutilized. But I know that oftentimes that's what we see, right? And I'll give my own example here. When I was younger, I didn't run, right? I started running in 2015. 16 is when I really started running seriously, right? So I've only been running for like, three and a half, 4 years. Um, but here's my story that I told myself. I'm short. I'm 5'4". I have a big head. I was asthmatic when I was younger. I can't be a runner, right? So I don't have the talent. Um, and if I believe that, then truly there is no running in my future, right? Certainly
Yeah.
not a marathon. And so you can sort of shatter those beliefs about your talent, realizing that if you're willing to take one step at a time, sometimes towards something, then you've got talent. If you like something enough, even though it might be uncomfortable, then you've got talent, right? And I think talent is one of those things. Even like you talk about trying different things. Like we were in art class together, and I never felt like I was a talented artist, but I love like just graphics and taking a brush and pulling a
Yeah.
straight line. Like, that stuff used to get me so excited. And so my talent maybe wasn't imaginative art or being able to just create things, but I had or have a talent when it comes to graphics and letters and that kind of stuff, because that's sort of what sort of resonates with me and gets me more excited, right? So I think talent is almost like it's very, look, we all have talent. It's very unique to you. It's almost like maybe something that gets you more excited, that you're willing to put in effort towards. But I think ultimately you still got to get up and put in the
Yeah.
effort, right? So you could have the greatest ideas or be more excited about multiple things. You might be a great cook, but if you don't actually put in the time and effort to become a great chef, then you're always going to love that. That's your talent. You love cooking, but
But
you've
yeah.
got to put in the time. So I definitely think that, I know for me, the belief that I didn't have talent is something that I walked around with in different areas of my life for a
Yeah.
long time, until you do it and you realize, well, maybe I am a runner with
Yeah.
my short self and my big head.
May- maybe I'll say this too. I think quite often what people call talent is sort of the high profile, sort of sexy talent. And you look at like the Olympics, everybody wants to go see the 100-meter runner. But there's a lot of other races happening that nobody really pays attention to. A lot of talented people are doing other things that people often do not look at. And so I think quite often people think of talent as a thing that everybody, that's popular, right? If you're a singer, then you're talented because everybody wants to hear that. And if you're a fast runner, everybody wants to see that. But I think, like you talk about grit, having the ability to start and finish something regardless of what it is, that's a huge talent. And that, people need that. They need people who could pick up something and take it from A all the way to the end, right? From the beginning to the end. So I think we shouldn't discount the things that we're good at. simply because people fail to recognize it. And I think you'll have to look internally and say, you know what, this is my talent. People may not recognize it, but this is what I'm good at, and I believe in that. So I think not being talented shouldn't be an excuse for stopping us from achieving our dreams. I think number three here is, it probably applies to us both, but the third one is, I come from a poor background. And I'll let you pick this one up, but that's one of the excuses I think we've all used sometimes. I wish, maybe I was born into wealth or something like that, but I'm having challenge succeeding because I was born into a poor background. Thoughts?
Yeah, this is one that's sort of near and dear to me. I think, I grew up a long time thinking that I didn't have resources. Right, I was poor, and I think I jokingly said to you the other day that as I've acquired more in life, I realized that I have less, and when I thought I didn't have much, I actually had a lot.
Yeah.
And you're right. I did this again for a long time, thinking, well, my circumstance, I really needed more resources, right? Um, and so there were certain things, certain assumptions that I made about, sort of my path, and what was possible, what was not possible, based on the fact that I didn't have resources.
Yeah.
Um, but we know that resources comes in very different forms, right? There's you can not have resources and be resourceful, right? In the sense that if you have the right conversations and leverage the right, um, the right resources that are potentially available to you. And there's a lot of resources, I think, that are available to us.
Right.
I remember growing up in Guyana, and we used to get excited when people bring stuff from overseas, right? And the canned stuff, and it was
Still
like,
do.
oh, fancy, right? You just open the can and eat it right away, or it doesn't take very long to cook it. Um, and But here we are, we can go to the market, right? In Guyana, we can get the best, freshest, or even as you did once in your backyard, right?
Yes.
Um, and so I think that's an example of what we think is a resource, right? So a canned product versus
Mm-hmm.
all these resources that we have available. And I think for most of us, that is our reality. Like, we wake up every day and we have tons of resources, right? We have access to information, we have access to mentors, we have access to knowledge, people that you can reach out to, people that you can look at, right? And mimic them. And so, I recognize now that I had resources, more resources than when I actually think I didn't have. I just, because of the fact that I walked around with that sense of maybe
Yeah.
I was poor and I didn't have resources, it actually prevented me from leveraging the resources that I had. And I
Yeah.
did some of it indirectly, but I do know that, for all of us, even now at this stage of life, right? If I can wake up and recognize that the resources that I think is available to me is a limiting thought, and there's actually more, right?
Yeah.
And so the challenge maybe is, what do I want to do? What do I think the resources are that'll get me there? And then sort of having open discussions, or at least being willing to write it
Yeah.
down. And I'll end with this on the resources thing. I remember, when I started running, and I worked in the audit room, and so we would sit in teams and we'd be at the table. And I was saying in the room, I was like, one of these days when I have me some money, I'm gonna hire me a running coach. And one of the guys that actually ran at Cornell University, he was like, "Well, I'll be your running coach for the amazing price of free." And that's a perfect example of, like, when we think we don't have resources and therefore we sort of throttle back on what we think is possible, and we're not even willing to say it out loud in an open setting
Yeah.
or even to ourselves, then we miss those opportunities. Had I not said that in that environment, I would have to go pay to get a running coach. When here was a running coach that a great friend of mine that's willing to do it for free, that's got a track record that can actually do it, and then be an accountability partner, right? So you move from saying maybe I need X amount of money to hire a running coach to here's a running coach that I could call up on my cell phone, I could log all my runs, I could go run with him. He could plot out a plan for me, and so all of a sudden now I've got access to all this resources
Yeah.
that I didn't have before just voicing that. So that's one example, I think.
I think that to add to that, our view of resources is very important. Quite often, when we said that we were poor, we always thought of it from a money perspective. I didn't have money to go and buy things. And you just made the great point. Well, you don't need money to buy certain things. And resources come in different ways, right? We talk about social capital, right? You had a family around you, people who loved you, and just the sense of family is a huge resource. To feel like somebody actually cares about you. I'm gonna tell you, there are people out there who've got a lot of wealth and they don't feel like people love them or care about them, and so they're missing that social resource. And if we think even about COVID-19 right now and our inability to sort of be with friends and family the way we want to, we begin to realize that that is such an important resource that we often take for granted. And so that's one thing. And when we were growing up, we may not have had a huge bank account or any bank account at all, but our social capital was through the roof, right? Just really through the roof. And sometimes, you talk about food, access to high quality food and nutritious food. And yeah, we were looking somewhere else for that. And now, right, we've made this full circle. We've gotten older and we've realized how important these things are. And now we're trying to live our lives going back, right? Going back to good quality food and good social capital and all these kinds of things. And I think people should realize that. So being poor and being from a poor background, for one, it's not something that holds you back. Where you start, right, is not where it wouldn't determine where you end up. It's not your destination. But more importantly, recognize the resources that you have around you, even if you're calling yourself poor, and say, hey, I've got all these things that I can use, all these right resources, right, in order to succeed. The maybe the final thing we'll talk about before we go is the big excuse is I don't have enough time. I am busy, Richard. I got tons of things to do. I got family, I got kids, I got work. There's so much on my plate. I can't stop to really go after my dreams. I got to keep paying the bills and I have to do all this stuff. This is real for a lot of people. Is this a legitimate reason for us not going after our dreams, Richard? Is this? I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy.
Um,
Pause there. I like
we
that.
all
To think
have
about this
24
one.
hours in the day, and I've been fortunate, I think, to be around um, a few high performing people. And guess what? They all have the same 24 hours.
Yeah.
I think the issue of time is an issue of priority, right? Um, a good friend of mine said for a long time he wanted to exercise, but he never had the time. He went to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, "You've got diabetes, and so if you don't exercise, it's going to get worse." He started exercising 4 days a week
You found the time?
for an hour, right? And that's the power of priority, right? I think if you want to do something, um, you have to set aside time for it, right? If you want to be healthy, then it's got to be a priority. It can be something you do after everything else is done. If you want to learn more, then learning has got to be a priority. There's got to be a time in the day for it to get it done. Um, and I'll go back to the earlier point of, we underestimate what we can do in the short term, and we overestimate what we can do in the short term and underestimate what we can do over a long period of time. And I think that that's the same thing with when we allocate time to our day, right? I mean, a half an hour towards something for 2 to 3 years, if it's a priority, has significant, power to sort of change the direction of where we're heading. So we all have 24 hours in a day. And if somewhere, and I think, again, we don't have to look far to see, I've got lots of great examples that I try to emulate, of people that are doing just incredible things. And they all have the same 24 hours in the day, right? I think we can make some assumptions about their circumstances and maybe what's easier for them or what's not easier for them. But I would say we all have time. I think maybe if you want to do something different in your life that you don't currently do, write it down, set a time for it, and just do little pieces at a time, right? We talked before about habits, and it doesn't take a lot. So I, I do believe we all have time. I think we prioritize our time differently, and when we make things that we want to do a priority, then we'll just be able to achieve it. So I'm going to end on that.
Yeah, I would say there are two things there, and you're right in terms of priority. Anytime I talk to someone and they say to me, let's say I'm asking for their time, or hey, can I talk to you, or can we meet on something, and they say to me, I'm busy. And this is not as an insult, but I always say it just means that I'm not a priority. And your day is filled with things that you're not willing to take that out and put me in. And so I think when someone says they're busy, it means I have packed my day with all the things that I think are a priority to me. And so you're absolutely right. You really have to look at, should all that stuff be in there, right? Should all that stuff be in there? And how do you move things around? Because you're right, there's only 24 hours. There's a cap on the amount of time that we absolutely have. But there's a powerful statement that you will never find time. You have to make it, right? And it's because it's fixed. It's never about finding the time to do things. It's about making the time to do things. And so this idea of being busy is about sitting down, looking at the things that we have and saying, what is a priority to me? And taking something out and putting something back in its place. Like, this is not a priority. This is not a priority. This is not a priority. And just really sticking, it's about time management, right? Just getting your priorities right and putting them within the time frame that you have, which, like you said, is only 24 hours. So you will never find time. You have to make it. And I think that's one of the things I think we have to realize, right? So being busy, just simply being busy, if your dreams are important, if you really want to succeed, if that's a priority for you, then you'll make time for it. You'll find time. You'll make time for it. Not find, you'll make time, right? You will shift around your priorities and try to make things happen. And so I think, being busy is not a good enough reason for us to not go after our dreams. And I think I'll pause it there. I think we've said a lot. I think on the going out things, I think I want people to know this is what I said. We've been saying to each other is, if you think you can and you think you can't, it's probably true.
Yeah. None of us are too old.
Exactly.
We all have resources and we all have time.
Exactly. And talent, we've all got talent in some way, and it's not the major ingredient for success anyway. So go back over these things. I think these are real good nuggets of things that I'm going to look over this again and try to reinforce these values and these principles. But, if we really want to set ourselves to go after something, let's put the excuses aside. Let's put, putting ourselves down, and then just go for it. Just go for it.
All right. No, and this is one, again, I think every time we have these conversations, we know that we can do another episode on it.
Definitely.
A second version. So no, thanks. Let's keep expanding the conversation.
Expand the conversation, guys. Bye.